The sun had barely risen over Washington, D.C. when a storm began brewing in the political landscape. At precisely 6 a.m., a classified report from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, was leaked to the media. The document contained what could only be described as a career-shattering exposé on Representative Ilhan Omar, a name that had long been at the center of controversy in American politics. The man leading the charge? Kash Patel, the newly appointed director of the FBI, known for his relentless pursuit of truth and justice. A former chief investigator in the Trump administration, Patel had gained a reputation for fearlessly tackling corruption even if it meant taking on powerful figures within the U.S. government. Standing at the podium in a surprise press conference, Kash Patel's eyes were sharp, his voice unwavering as he addressed a room packed with journalists, flashing cameras, and an audience that was both anxious and electrified. "Ladies and gentlemen, the American people deserve the truth," Patel began, gripping the edges of the lectern. For years, certain individuals have been operating in the shadows, manipulating the system for their own gain, evading accountability, and deceiving the very citizens who trusted them. Today, we uncover one such case, an investigation into Representative Ilhan Omar. A stunned silence fell over the room. Even the most seasoned political analysts hadn't seen this coming. Patel continued, "The FBI has uncovered overwhelming evidence of corruption, illegal activities, and affiliations that threaten our nation's security. The details are shocking, and they will be made available to the public." Gasps rippled through the audience. The gravity of the situation was sinking in. What could the FBI have discovered about Ilhan Omar that warranted such a bold statement? The start of the investigation. The story began months earlier when several whistleblowers within Congress and federal agencies had approached Patel's office with alarming information. These were not baseless accusations but documents, financial records, and witness testimonies that pointed toward a long-running scheme of fraud, foreign influence, and deceit. The FBI quietly launched an extensive investigation into Omar's financial dealings, campaign activities, and personal history. What they found was a tangled web of connections that led to some of the most controversial foreign entities. Patel, known for his sharp instincts, knew that this wasn't just another political scandal, this was something bigger. Among the evidence, investigators discovered shocking financial transactions involving foreign organizations, multiple false statements made under oath, illegal campaign contributions funneling money into questionable sources, high-level connections with individuals under federal surveillance, and perhaps the most explosive revelation, an undisclosed involvement in activities that could raise serious national security concerns. The moment Patel read through the files, he knew this was a case that could not be ignored. The suspicious paper trail. The first major red flag came from Omar's campaign finances. Investigators found irregularities in campaign donations with large sums of money moving through obscure channels, money that had ties to individuals flagged by intelligence agencies for suspected foreign influence operations. One of the FBI's forensic accountants explained, "The numbers don't add up. Large donations were funneled through shell companies, then distributed to PACs with no clear oversight. Some of these funds were linked to organizations with known extremist affiliations. The question is, who was really financing her campaigns and what did they expect in return?" The deeper they dug, the more troubling the discoveries became. Patel and his team found direct links to lobbyists and groups that had long been suspected of working against U.S. interests. This wasn't just about money, it was about influence, policy manipulation, and potentially a dangerous foreign agenda at play. The political world was about to be turned upside down, and Kash Patel was about to drop a bombshell that would shake the nation. The moment Kash Patel stepped off the podium, the media frenzy exploded. News networks scrambled to decipher the implications of his statement. Some called it a desperate political attack, while others sensed that something massive was about to unfold. Social media was set ablaze with hashtags like #IlhanOmarExposed and #FBILeaks, with millions of Americans demanding answers. Inside the FBI's headquarters, Patel and his team were poring over the massive cache of evidence that had been compiled. The deeper they dug, the more disturbing the connections became. The fraudulent background, who is the real Ilhan Omar? One of the most shocking discoveries was the misrepresentation of Omar's personal history. The FBI had obtained sealed immigration documents that suggested serious discrepancies in her official records. A senior investigator who had been following the case for months briefed Patel personally. "Sir, we've got evidence suggesting that Omar's identity and entry into the U.S. may have been manipulated. We're talking about potential immigration fraud on a level we've rarely seen before." Patel raised an eyebrow. Go on. The investigator pulled out a series of documents that contained passport records, immigration applications, and sworn affidavits from key witnesses. We believe she may have falsified information about her family background when she first entered the United States. Certain documents indicate that she may not have been who she claimed to be when she applied for asylum. And here's where it gets worse. Our forensic experts found inconsistencies in her marriage records suggesting the possibility of fraud to circumvent immigration laws. This revelation alone would have been enough to launch a federal inquiry, but what Patel's team uncovered next was even more disturbing. Campaign corruption and illegal financial transactions. While the immigration fraud findings were explosive, Patel knew they needed hard financial evidence to make the case irrefutable. That's when the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit stumbled upon a pattern of suspicious campaign contributions. A confidential informant, someone who had worked within Omar's inner circle, came forward with emails, wire transfer records, and hidden communication logs. The documents revealed a secret network of offshore accounts that had been funneling money into Omar's campaign and personal finances. One transaction in particular caught Patel's attention: a $500,000 transfer from an unknown Middle Eastern donor into a PAC supporting Omar's re-election campaign. Sir, an agent explained, the sender is linked to an organization that has been flagged by multiple intelligence agencies for funneling money into political figures willing to push their interests in Congress. Patel's expression darkened. Are you saying there's a chance that a sitting U.S. congresswoman is taking money from foreign operatives to push policies against American interests? The pieces were falling into place. It wasn't just about campaign finance violations or past immigration fraud. This was something far more dangerous. Patel knew what had to be done. A full-fledged federal case was now underway, and the next step would be the most explosive yet, bringing the evidence to Congress and the American people. The pressure on Kash Patel was mounting. The evidence against Representative Ilhan Omar was overwhelming, but the stakes were higher than ever. If Patel moved forward with formal charges, it could trigger one of the most controversial political scandals in modern U.S. history. The White House had already caught wind of the situation. Patel received a late-night call from a senior official, the kind of call that carried the weight of an entire administration. "Kash, do you understand what you're about to do?" The voice on the other end asked. "Yes, and that's exactly why I'm doing it," Patel replied. "This could tear the country apart. We're talking about a sitting member of Congress, a major political figure. You need to be careful." Patel knew the risks, but he also knew that the American people deserved the truth, no matter how powerful the person being investigated was. The FBI's secret evidence dump. While Patel prepared for his next move, his team was working behind the scenes on a highly classified operation, something they called Project Sentinel. The plan was simple but dangerous. White heavy checkmark, compile every piece of evidence into a watertight case. White heavy checkmark, secure testimonies from key whistleblowers under federal protection. White heavy checkmark, coordinate with high-ranking members of Congress to ensure the case wouldn't be buried. White heavy checkmark, prepare for massive political backlash from Omar's supporters. The night before the final report was set to be released, a sudden breakthrough changed everything. One of the FBI's digital forensic teams managed to access a deleted email archive from a confidential server linked to Omar's campaign. The contents were so explosive that Patel himself had to review them personally. What he found made his blood run cold. The email that could end it all. Among the thousands of recovered emails, there was one chain of messages that stood out. It was between Omar's top advisor and a well-known foreign lobbyist who had been flagged by U.S. intelligence agencies. In the email, the advisor wrote, "We need the funding secured before the vote. The policy adjustments are in motion. Expect a favorable outcome." The response from the lobbyist was even more damning. "Understood. The next transfer will be routed through the usual channels. Do not leave a paper trail." Patel slammed his fist on the table. This is it. This is the smoking gun. The email proved direct coordination between Omar's team and a foreign entity that was actively trying to influence U.S. policy. This wasn't just illegal, it was a matter of national security. Patel wasted no time. The next morning at exactly 9 a.m., the FBI's official report was sent to Congress, key intelligence agencies, and the Department of Justice. The nation reacts, the storm begins. The moment the FBI's findings hit the public, the country erupted. Major news networks interrupted their regular programming to cover the scandal. Social media exploded with calls for Omar's resignation and criminal prosecution. Congressional leaders were forced to respond, with some demanding an immediate investigation while others called it a political witch hunt. Ilhan Omar's team issued a furious statement calling the allegations fabricated and Islamophobic attacks designed to silence her. But Patel knew the truth was undeniable. The evidence was clear, verified, and legally sound. The only question left was, would Omar fight back, or would she finally face justice? The revelations from the FBI's bombshell report sent shockwaves through Washington. But Ilhan Omar was not going down without a fight. Within hours of the report's release, her legal team and political allies launched an aggressive counterattack, calling the allegations baseless, politically motivated, and outright false. At a hastily arranged press conference, Omar stood before a sea of flashing cameras, her expression one of defiance and fury. "This is nothing more than a coordinated smear campaign against me," she declared, her voice filled with anger. "Kash Patel and his allies are using the FBI as a weapon to silence me because I refuse to back down from my principles." Her supporters erupted into applause, while her critics doubled down on their calls for her resignation. But Omar wasn't just relying on public statements. She was preparing to strike back legally and politically. The political war begins. Within 24 hours, Omar's team filed a formal lawsuit against the FBI, alleging wrongful investigation, defamation, and political targeting. Meanwhile, her allies in Congress, including several high-profile members of the Progressive Caucus, demanded Patel's immediate resignation, accusing him of abusing his position to target political opponents. A heated debate broke out on the Senate floor, with lawmakers clashing over whether the investigation was legitimate or a political hit job. Senator Tom Reynolds, Republican Texas, the FBI uncovered real evidence of corruption and foreign influence. "This isn't about politics. It's about national security." Senator Linda Martinez, Democrat California, "This is nothing more than a politically motivated attack on the first Somali-American woman in Congress. It's an embarrassment to our democracy." The media was split, with some networks calling for Omar to step down, while others framed her as a victim of a deep state conspiracy. Patel, however, was unfazed. He knew that the evidence spoke for itself. The emails, financial records, and whistleblower testimonies were too strong to ignore. The DOJ steps in the legal showdown approaches. Behind closed doors, the Department of Justice, DOJ, convened a high-level meeting to discuss the case. Attorney General Michael Harrington, a man known for his no-nonsense approach to the law, sat at the head of the table, reviewing the evidence Patel's team had gathered. After a tense 2-hour discussion, the decision was made. The DOJ would launch formal criminal proceedings against Ilhan Omar. Charges being considered included white heavy checkmark campaign finance violations, white heavy checkmark immigration fraud, white heavy checkmark wire fraud, white heavy checkmark conspiracy to commit election fraud, white heavy checkmark violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA. The moment the DOJ's official announcement hit the airwaves, the country erupted once again. For the first time in U.S. history, a sitting congresswoman was facing possible federal indictment. The weight of the Department of Justice's announcement sent shockwaves across America. A sitting U.S. congresswoman facing federal charges was unprecedented, a moment that would be etched into history. As the legal process unfolded, Kash Patel remained steadfast. He had spent months unraveling the web of deceit, and now justice was within reach. But Ilhan Omar wasn't going down quietly. The arrest and the fallout. 2 weeks after the DOJ's announcement, federal agents arrived at Omar's Washington, D.C. residence with an arrest warrant. The scene was chaotic. Protesters and supporters clashed outside her home, reporters swarmed the streets, and security was on high alert. As the agents led Omar away in handcuffs, she glared defiantly at the cameras. "This is a political witch hunt. They're trying to silence me because I speak the truth," she shouted as her legal team rushed to contain the situation. The images of a high-profile congresswoman being taken into custody were unreal, dominating news cycles for weeks. Some hailed it as a victory for justice, while others called it a dangerous precedent of political persecution. The trial of the century. With the entire nation watching, Omar's trial became one of the most closely followed court cases in American history. White heavy checkmark FBI analysts testified about the fraudulent immigration records. White heavy checkmark whistleblowers exposed secret financial transactions and illicit campaign dealings. White heavy checkmark forensic accountants detailed the foreign money trails leading to her campaign. White heavy checkmark declassified intelligence reports linked her to questionable foreign contacts. The prosecution's case was airtight, and despite her legal team's best efforts, Omar's defense crumbled under the mountain of evidence. The jury deliberated for less than 48 hours before delivering their verdict, guilty on multiple counts. The judge, recognizing the severity of the crimes, sentenced Omar to 20 years in federal prison, one of the harshest sentences ever handed down to a sitting politician. America reacts, the aftermath. Kash Patel became a household name, hailed as a hero for exposing the corruption. Some even called for him to run for higher office. Congress underwent a major shakeup with strict new regulations on campaign financing and foreign lobbying. Ilhan Omar's political career was over, her name forever tied to one of the biggest scandals in U.S. history. As Patel walked out of the courthouse, reporters bombarded him with questions. But he simply smiled and said, "The American people deserve the truth. And today they got it." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a legacy of justice, resilience, and a warning to all who would dare betray the nation's trust.